Good morning, everybody. Hope you all have it. Sorry, I had to put the show back an hour, but I had an award ceremony to go to for my daughter, and that was fun. She got an award for building a suspense bridge when she went to Silverwoods this last couple weeks ago. So it was kind of cool. I had contemplated whether I'd wanted to go or not, but I figured, yeah, I'll go. I can always put the show back, and my guests were kind enough to oblige me that time. Um, Lane and Cary are two individuals that have been attending Awaken for a bit, and I met them through there. For those of you who know about Awaken, but they're missionaries and they're awful young. Okay, really young kids. They're 12 and 13. No, I'm just kidding. 5 and 6. No, but they're young. They're young individuals that have taken on themselves the chore of the mission field, and they've been going into some very dangerous locations to do this. And I wanted to bring them on to bring some more awareness because I think in America we get too bogged down in the culture war and forget that there's a spiritual war going on out there, and there are people that are nose deep in it and are refusing to back down to Satan when he's trying to win more souls for hell than a lot of Christians are trying to do for heaven. So I wanted to get them on and to have them introduce themselves to you guys so you can see that even if you're a young person out there, you can be doing a lot for the kingdom. So without further ado, please welcome Lane and Cary to the program. Good morning.
Hey, how you guys doing? I'm Lane. I'm 13 years old. This is my wife.
Oh,
That was good.
that was good.
And well, hey, I'm just saying the audience can see that you look. The only
Yes.
reason that you don't look as young is because I can see a little bit of shave stubble happening there. I can see the shadows.
This is as far as it goes, man.
Oh, that's it? Okay. Hey, I can't grow here either. Okay. This is all I got. I've had
2
this
months
for
later,
20
it'll look
years.
just like this.
Yeah. For 20 years, this is all I could do. And even then, it took me 10 years to get this part to growing. So I feel you. I feel you. I'm going to start doing that therapy, the
Yeah.
nailing of the skin. Yeah. I thought about it, but I don't think a beard is worth it.
Nah.
So thank you for coming on. Thank you for agreeing to be on the program today.
Thanks for
Um,
having us.
I'm going to give you a couple of minutes to break down who you are, what you've been doing, and where you guys are headed this summer. And when you're done, just give me a thumbs up, and I'll come back on. And I have a couple of questions I wanted to ask you. But go ahead and introduce yourself to the wide world.
Awesome. So Lane and Cary, we are missionaries. We use music to kind of open the door to different missions, both in the U.S. and Europe, working in schools, youth homes, and doing stuff like that. And then any money we make from music, we take 100% of the profits into international missions. We've been working for about 10 years in Southeast Asia, but really the last 5-6 years, we spent some time living in Myanmar, Thailand, China, and doing missions in those regions, as well as Ukraine and other parts of Europe, doing relief missions into Ethiopia, Kenya, Syria, Iraq, and also working in the counter human trafficking world. Want to add anything to that?
I feel like you got most of it wrapped up.
Yeah. So we kind of we do crazy hip hop pop music, and that is one way just to reach out to youth and young people, and with a clear message of Jesus and of loving God with everything that you have and loving your neighbor as yourself, as Matthew 22 says, and then another verse for us that kind of sums everything up is James 1:27. It says, pure religion in the sight of God the Father looks like this, caring for widows and orphans in their distress. And we've been lucky enough to see the world a little bit and see some of the terrible things going on and realize, wow, we got to do something about this, even if it's crazy, even if, we might not come back.
So a couple of the things that we've done this year, we started off January launching a new thing that we're doing called Unit E, and we went into Ethiopia. There's been a civil war in Ethiopia happening for the last few years, and for 2 years, the northern part of Ethiopia has been blocked off from food on all sides. There's no food that can go in or out, not that it would be going out. On top of that, Africa, the Horn of Africa is going through one of the worst recorded droughts in history. So it's kind of a double whammy on food shortage there. So Lane and I had seen this conflict going on, and we prayed about where we were supposed to be in January and felt like God said Ethiopia. And when we got to Ethiopia, the way was still closed, but after we got there, we found a way to get into that northern part and to bring some food in. So we spent all of the money that we had made from music in the last like 6 months, and we loaded up a small little semi with food, and we drove it into some of the northern parts of Ethiopia. We did a food distribution for some refugee camps in the town of Sokoto. And we also got to do some concerts for kids there, because one of the things that happens when somebody has to live in a refugee or an IDP, internally displaced person camp, is that there is no school immediately. There's nothing to do. People can't take all their belongings with them. You have to take the most important things that you can carry in your arms, and you have to go. So there's no infrastructure for these kids. There's no playgrounds. There's nothing for them to do. So what we like to do is bring in battery-powered speakers and host concerts. We like to bring balloons. We like to bring little ribbons to play like a flag football game. Just anything we can do to bring these kids joy, because they're kind of in this conflict area, and their parents are so overwhelmed with survival that they don't have time to play. So we want to try to move into that space and play with them as much as we can.
Awesome sauce. Now, I have some very, 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 very in-depth questions for you.
Wow.
Yeah,
No pressure.
no pressure at all. So you better answer honestly, or I'll cut you from the program. No, I'm just kidding.
From the program.
Yeah, from the program. Just get you ready. Anybody need to hear what you say. You recently came to one of our training sessions at the building, and you were amazing. Trying to get yourself in a position where you can be physically prepared for any kind of conflict that you might encounter while doing the mission field. In your past experience, how much of an issue did you find with people trying to physically try to stop you from doing the mission work?
So general culture and, different places, it's kind of, it's different, but, we've been to some more militarized danger, like in Syria, Ukraine, and stuff like that. And, there are certain, physical stops to that, whether it's, a bomb going off nearby, or looking out for, attacks from like the Turkish army, or different stuff like that. But, this last year, we've really started to go into places where it's less militarized, and it's more, gang related, cartel, or even just random crime. So I got to do a counter trafficking mission into Latin America earlier this year. And that was, it's just a different kind of awareness that you have to have. But I think the biggest one was Ethiopia. We got robbed night number one. We had to hide out in the back of the truck and run from these guys and all kinds of stuff like that. So,
I would like to add to that, though, as many weird places we've been, and as much as we've been doing, I feel like God has protected us in a really incredible way. I mean, the two guys that we were running from that night, I'm not particularly.
We could probably take them.
No, I was scared of them. I don't have any illusions about my strength that way. But I'm not particularly attentive all the time. But for some reason that night, I just caught them immediately. Like the second I walked out the door, I saw the two guys, and then I noticed that they were watching us. And then just even when we ran down the street into the taxi pulled up right in time for us to get into the cab and get out of there. Stuff like that, I feel like God has really protected us when we're in the places that we're meant to be. And of course, at a certain point in time, there may be something where things get more dangerous. And that's not really, we try not to focus too much on that. We try to be prepared as much as we can, but we don't focus on that, because the fact of the matter is as scary as it might be, if we die or get hurt bringing food to people who are starving, or, you know, bringing joy to orphans in a war zone. Like, that's, to me, I feel like that would be the biggest honor, to die in that place right there. Because as soon as you die, you know, Jesus is like, what were you doing? And you're like, I was doing this. He's going to be like,
Pretty sweet.
well done. Good job. So, which is my hope.
Yeah. And like I say, I've told you this before, it's not a bad thing to be prepared to at least defend yourself. It's not, because you still want the work to continue. And if it is your time, it's your time. I mean, but that doesn't stop you from having at least a fail safe in place to preserve what work you are doing. With you mentioned human trafficking. How big of an issue in the places you've gone to has that been? Because we've been told over here it's not that big a deal. It's not really happening anywhere, so stop worrying about it. But you're on the ground, overseas, away from where people can lie to you on screen. How big of an issue did you see in the locations you've been to, or is it relegated to only one particular portion of your trips?
And so it's a weird thing to say, but numbers wise, there are more slaves right now than any time in history. And
yes, there are.
You go to some of these places and you really see, you know, a lot of, I work with an organization called the Exodus Road, and we focus on, you know, labor trafficking, you know, like sweatshops, which, you know, Cary and I have also really come to a focus on recently, and then looking for, you know, underage girls being sold for sex, which it's crazy. You go to some of these places and it's everywhere. You just walk down the street and it's like a high school dance, but it's different. And then you look into the shadows and you see, okay, there's somebody controlling this, you know, and it's pretty unreal. And then trafficking from, you know, other countries and continents into, you know, I ended up finding a girl in Southeast Asia that had been trafficked from Africa, and she was told that she was going to get a job as a maid, good paying, benefits, and, you know, good place to stay, the whole thing. And then she showed up and they took her passport away. And they said, if you go to the police, we'll plant drugs on you and get you arrested. So now go sell yourself. And this is happening by the hundreds and thousands in maybe every country, a good chunk of the countries around the world.
One thing I'd like to add to that is that trafficking is not always like, sometimes it is this crazy, huge cloak and dagger operation, but oftentimes it's actually not. One of the things that we've run into a lot is that the women or the men that are being trafficked have put themselves in that situation because their family is starving to death. Or, you know, one case that we ran into in Cambodia, this was fairly common, is that a woman would be sold by her family as a young girl, you know, 12 years old. And then she would be sold into trafficking. You know, she would be a sex worker against her will. But at a certain point in time, she ends up getting pregnant and having her own child. And at a certain point, she's no longer able to sell her body anymore. And she's on the streets, and she has maybe 2 or 3 kids from being sold so many times. And so she'll have to sell one of her kids as well, and she'll sell her kid back into the cycle. And I'm not saying that this is right at all, but we have to view this holistically. Like, trafficking is something that all of us have a responsibility to stop. We all need to look at where our clothes are being made. We all need to look at some of the content we're viewing online. Like, we need to really think holistically, like, what is this contributing to? What am I doing? Like, why is there so much money in it? It's because so many people are consuming the products of trafficking.
Have you realized in any way, shape, and form that because I know you work with some churches, okay, and you depend a lot on donations and people supporting and stuff like that. But do you think that the majority of modern day believers have lost sight of what it means to be a hand and the feet, and they think that, and this is what I believe too, that a lot of them think that this is, oh, it's only a certain amount of people that do that, and I'll let them do that, and I'll just kind of sit and watch on the sidelines. And they seem to have this hands off approach to what is happening to people today. Now, do you see that being the case on a larger scale or is it more isolated to the Americas than it is to churches abroad?
Yeah. So on a recent trafficking operation, I was undercover playing a role, and I was talking to the owner of this club, and he was from Europe, just normal guy running a club that we found, girls being trafficked through. And one comment he made to me was, when you're an owner of a club out here, you just got to do this. Just shut your eyes, shut your ears, and just not worry about what's going on in the background. And that hit me when he said that. And I realized that's what we're doing here in America. I mean, around the world too, but I think especially in America, we're so far from it that, and it does happen here as well, but we're also far from it in our comforts, that we're just kind of, we shut our eyes, we kind of shut our ears, and we're like, well, that's going on, but I don't really know how to help. And I don't really know what's going on. And I really, want to add on to my house here, and I've got big plans, and, we kind of out of sight, out of mind. And that's really hard.
I think it's also kind of a plague of numbers as well. I mean, you can kind of justify anything you want by looking around and finding other people that are behaving the same way as you. You know what I mean? There are times where I've absolutely not done what I felt like God was calling me to do. And the way that I justified it was by looking at somebody else's life and thinking, well, they're not doing that either, so I'm probably fine. And I think that's such a easy thing to get into in America. Not only that, but sometimes the decisions that Lane and I make, like when we say we're going to Syria, we get 20 phone calls from people telling us we're being irresponsible and that this is stupid. We're throwing our lives away. And here's the thing, is that those people are trying to protect us. They love us. They don't want us to die. Of course, they don't want bad things to happen to us. I get it. But on the other hand, I think we kind of got lost and thought that Christianity is supposed to be about family and living a good life. And it's really not. Being a Christian is being set against the world and being martyred sometimes. And, there's so many beautiful sides of it, but comfort is not our goal. And unfortunately, family is not our goal either. Jesus doesn't really talk about making sure that you are raising healthy kids that have a good education and stuff. Jesus talks about going and sacrificing, and that your kids will be honored in that way, even,
Well, he promised us the turmoil, and we've been trying to avoid it here. What I've noticed, and the reason I asked that question is because I've noticed a trend, and you're the perfect people to ask this. Okay. So what I have noticed is a trend. When I started podcasting and I joined forces with my friend Corey over in Indiana, and we had that bigger platform I told you about, it's called Too Strong. In just 1 year, well, technically a year and a half, when we first started the program, we started talking a whole lot about the exploitation of children and the elites that are trafficking them and using them as source material for all kinds of nefarious means. We were going gangbusters. People were interested. They were sharing it, listening to it. Today, as of today, we could put something up about the exploitation of children, and it would get zero traction. We put something up about a gossip, and it would make massive airways. And mind you, the majority of our followers are supposedly people that are following God. So what we've noticed is this, not even a slight turn, a humongous flip from the concerns about the kingdom things to the concerns about the world things. And this is all in the so-called church. When you are going out in the mission field, do you see for yourself a different version of God than what you see in the Americas in terms of what people think is a God move here, or I went up to the altar, versus what you see as a God move in the mission field? How much of a chasm is there between the two?
Huge.
Go ahead.
Huge. Yeah. One of the things that we typically see overseas is people are giving up a lot for God. And when people are praying for God to come through, they're praying about somebody who is paralyzed from the neck down and blind. They're praying about, God, please feed us the next 2 weeks. We're out of money. We're out of food. We have nothing. And one of the most striking things I remember seeing over in Ethiopia and Kenya when we did food distributions. In America, you'll hear people say, like, pray that God helps us to find the right house to buy, which I think you should be praying about where you're going to be living. I think it's really important. But that's the most common prayer request I hear, or like, pray that I hear from God about this small problem. Whereas I remember going to Kenya and Ethiopia when we would hand people food. I remember one woman stands up and she gave a speech in front of everybody. She said, "This morning I prayed to God for food and God provided this food to me this morning." And it was so beautiful to see this woman like glorifying God literally in starvation, like in the depths of poverty that Americans will never, ever know. Like, it is almost impossible to starve to death in America. This woman is on the doorstep of it and she's saying, praise God, I asked him for it this morning and he provided to me. Like, so that's a huge difference I see, is like, we don't have the same level of desperation here. And I think that's why you're seeing people look away from some of the trafficking things, because staring into evil hurts. It doesn't feel good. When I think about, where my shirt was made, I feel bad. And it would be a lot easier for me to go and do anything that I want if I'm not thinking about this kind of evil. And in America, it's so easy to blind yourself to evil because we have, we're like geniuses of marketing. Like, we can truly hide from it here. And so when you get tired of experiencing the sorrow that comes from being a Christian and seeing the reality of situations, instead of leaning into God, a lot of us close our eyes and we,
Run.
go back into the simulation of.
Yeah, we run.
Yeah, we run.
What is your biggest struggle as missionaries spiritually?
Gosh.
It's a tough question.
I would say not having a ton of people that.
It's coming back. It's not the culture. Everybody's like, oh gosh, did you have culture shock going to this crazy place? And I was like, no, I had culture shock coming back to America. I'm with these people that are, just.
They're desperate for them.
A lot of them have smiles on their faces too, as they're going through living in a tin house with 46 people in there. And they're like, yeah, God, thank you for today. And then we get on a plane and come back to America and people are like, oh my gosh, I'm complaining about this and that and the other thing. I was like, whoa, okay, this is, and even going kind of into the last question, there is so much internal here. I think it's just a lot of us, it's not our fault. It's all around us. It's been ingrained in our culture, and other places have that problem too. But even the prayers being different, like you said, like I'll never forget being, at in an earthquake, a big earthquake that happened years back, with 50, I think it was 50 Christian missionaries. And after it happened, we were all freaked out, and we had just seen, in Nepal, and we had just seen all these houses just come down and the dust fly up like bombs and people screaming, and just the worst thing in the foothills of the Himalayas. And then after we gathered around this circle, like 50 of us praying, and I think there was like 6 to 10 people went around praying, and not one of them mentioned the other people there. It was all, God, thank you that we're alive, that you kept us safe, and and please keep us safe. And it was this internal thing that we all get kind of wrapped up in so easily here. And I jumped in and I was like, God, we are so sorry that this happened to these people. I can't imagine what they're going through.
I would say one of my struggles to add on to that is not getting sucked into that. Like Lane is like a very independent thinker. I'm really like, I'm really impressionable. It's pretty easy to influence me based on what I'm around. And I notice the longer that I'm in America, the more I start to get into that comfort mindset, and the more I start to like, oh, it's probably okay if I, go to Starbucks today and spend $10 on something that I don't need. Whereas, the second I go somewhere like Thailand or Ethiopia, I'm like, what am I doing? Like, that's not who I want to be. That's not who I feel like God has called me to be. So I think that's the biggest spiritual struggle for me, is coming back to America. I get a lot of fellowship because you're with people that speak the same language as you, your native English, like, so you can connect on a different way. But it's really easy to get drawn back into the complacency that is so comfortable and so easy to access here.
One thing we found, just to kind of throw out some advice, is sign yourself up, sign your future self up for stuff that you might not want to do at the time. Yeah. A lot of people say, I could never do what you guys do, or I couldn't live like that or something. You can sign yourself up for something wild, and, sign up for a mission trip, or change the way you do this. I mean, part of Cary and I have waited on kids. We don't have our own place. We don't pay rent. We just kind of crash. And part of that is to kind of sign ourselves up for this, taken away from some comfort, and so that we can make decisions like, okay, let's spend our money on this mission, or let's go do this thing, or let's take this 3-day flight to this weird place. And
we're really public about it for the sake of not being able to back out, because that's the defense mechanism for me. Is like, I remember when we were thinking about just giving all the money we make from music into missions, and I remember feeling so scared to make that decision, and and I remember the moment I brought it up to Lane, I really didn't feel like I was ready to do it, but I knew that if I brought it up to Lane, that I would be accountable to the thought. And then we started thinking about it. And then we decided, let's do it. The first thing we did was announce it to everybody that we knew, like, this is what we're doing. And the reason that we do that is because it's really easy to get comfortable. And if 50 people know that we've decided that we never want to own a house, and we've decided to wait on kids so that we can serve the mission field, like, there's an accountability to me. Like, not only am I accountable to God, but all those other people too are going to see that action. And I want to make sure that I'm honoring the words that I say.
And we publicly posted about it too. We were like, all right, from now on, 100% of our profits in music go to missions. And it's like, what, 100? Like, we
don't do that because we, want like the virtue of it or the shock value. Like, we literally do it because we know our own hearts enough to know that it's really easy to back out on that commitment if other people don't know about it. And so that's a great way for us to, like, okay, we have to do it now. We've said that we're doing it.
Your statement reminds me of Matthew 10. And I'll read this out here. When he told people when he sent them out, he said, do not get any gold or silver or copper to take with you in your belts. No bag for the journey, no extra shirt, no sandals, no staff. For the worker is worth his keep. Whatever town or village you enter, search there for someone worthy to stay with in their house until you leave. And as you enter the home, give it your greeting. If the home is deserving, let your peace rest on it. If not, let your peace return to you. Your approach to not having tides to an anchor point, I'd call it an anchor point. You're more of a free-floating boat. I don't think you necessarily have to be in the mission field to live that mindset. I think, okay, so I rent a home, okay? But what I've been noticing for me is that I am not identified by that, and I'm provided that, but it is not my identity. My identity is somewhere else. And if this goes away, then it goes away. And if it doesn't go away, then it doesn't go away. I'm not tied to so I'm not doing my work in order to maintain it. It's being maintained while I do my work, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
The other thing that jumped out too at me was when you said that there were people that you make it public, right? And in Hebrews, it says, let us hold resolutely to the hope we profess, for he who promised is faithful, and let us spur one another unto love and good works. And I think that public acclamation of what you're doing is a way of spurring, and it can, like, the reason why I have you on is so that you can spur other people into doing the same thing. Because I think, like I said, American Christianity has become a sporting event. You just sit down and watch other people play ball. And then you complain when one person gets injured because it cost your team the game. And then you complain because of how the managers run the game. Meanwhile, you're not playing. you're just kind of sitting there watching and saying, well, I paid money and I paid good money, so you better be doing your job. And that's what I think the church has become. Unfortunately, it's become the spectator's game, and we expect 1, 2, 5 missionaries to do the job of millions.
Mm.
We've become a body that pays for the service of God. And I think that's a sad statement, but it's a true statement from what I can see. And I know,
Mm.
of course, there are some churches that are inundated with mission work. They love doing it, and that's what their whole goal is. But I fear that what we have, and this is America, I think I'm talking mostly about it. What I fear is happening is that we have become something completely opposite of the actual church. We've become a hotbed for a microcosm of lackadaisicality. We've
Mm.
been content to do just the minimum, and if the bare minimum is that's all I can do. I've done my job for God. I'll pray for you and I'll send you some money. So here you go, blah. And we don't do anything even in the small places that we do have.
Mm.
In your estimation, what is the one thing, aside from going into foreign countries, what do you see as the one thing that the modern church can do to um, get itself out of this materialistic rut that they've planted themselves into? What would you suggest to everyday, modern day, run of the mill Christians to do that they can get out of that mindset?
I think I'm realizing right now that I've missed a huge part of our story. And this is the most important thing I think that people can do to get them out of that mindset is like pray desperately
Hmm.
that God will move you to be more radical with your life. That's something that Lane and I did. We're not born like this. All of us are the same in the sense that comfort really appeals to us.
Mm.
But I think the one thing is that God, like, I think the only thing I've ever done right with my life is giving God an invitation, like make me a really radical, wild person that will do anything for you. Like, cause I'm a coward naturally. I am really selfish naturally. I don't have you can ask Lane. I mean, sometimes I'm afraid to like ask a waitress for a glass of water at a restaurant. It's not naturally who I am, but one thing that I've done is pray desperately on my knees, weeks at a time, like, God, make me love you. Please make me love you. Like, I invite you to change my mind about money. I invite you to change my mind about my body, about my life. And I think that's the most important thing that we can do is asking God to make us radical for him and make us love him so much that we would throw away literally anything. And I think, it's tempting to get into the trap of like trying to do it on our own strength, which doesn't ever, it's honorable to try, but it doesn't end well because we
Yeah.
do need God to do this, to say no to ourselves. So the start is asking God, like, please make me radical. And then the follow-up to that is that when you get an answer, whatever it is, maybe it's something, it's different for everybody. Everybody has a different thing that they're holding on to instead of God. And when God points out that thing to you, when you feel God urging you to do something that scares the heck out of you, like, pray for the courage to do it and don't say no to God. If you ask him for that help and he gives you the answer, like, I promise you, whatever he tells you to give up, it's going to be so, so worth it. And your fear is going to just run in and be screaming in your ears until the second that you let go of whatever it is you're supposed to let go.
Mm-hmm.
And the second you do, it's like suddenly you see with new eyes and you're like, oh my gosh,
This
I
is
can't believe I
amazing.
almost let myself,
Mhm.
be stopped by this fear. And you realize after you give something up, like, that's not even a real thing. It doesn't matter.
Hmm.
And the more you do that, the more you see like, oh, like I am capable of more. I think a lot of times we quit before the finish line. And we're like, I think I think that was enough. Like, that's probably good. But really, like, God wants good things, amazing things. And if we do follow him further and see what's possible, I mean, worst case scenario, you die and go to heaven. Like, but 1 John 3, 1 John 3:16 says, we know what real love looks like because Jesus laid down his life for us. So we should lay down our lives for our brothers and sisters. and continuing to ask, like, gosh, could I lay down a little bit more? And then you see God work through it, and it's like, oh, this is exciting. You almost get that kind of like childish like energy, like, oh my gosh, like, should we give up something else, like, or should we go a little further with God? And it becomes amazing. And I think one thing for American churches is, of course, in third world countries, we see a lot of outreach because it's so necessary with the different conditions of, food and just daily life. But even in Europe, we've been working with churches, doing missions and tours in Europe the last couple of years, and they're so outreach focused. It's really a beautiful thing. They, even churches that have more money or that are doing better, you see a little bit less of let's build our thing, and put the walls around our people. And you see like a lot of like budget being spent on like outreach events, like how can we reach out to schools, low income neighborhoods, stuff like that. And I think the more churches here get into that, the more they'll be like, oh my gosh, this is, wow.
Yeah.
This is the
And
mission.
yeah, it doesn't have to be overseas. I mean, there's so much ministry to be done in America. To be honest with you, just to be straight, like it's something I even struggle with, is doing ministry in America is hard in a different way, because there's a very huge history to the church here, and some of it's really painful for people. And so if we go out and do street evangelism, probably, we might get maybe somebody will even go to the extent of spitting in our face, but people are going to be mad and people are going to be ridiculing us. And I think it's really like one of the radical things we could all do better is loving people like that. Loving people who have been so hurt by the church that they want to spit in your face when you do ministry. That is really hard. It's really hard to love people when they do something like that to you. But that's a piece of ministry that all of us could do a little bit better every day. Is it doesn't have to look like going to Ethiopia or Thailand if that's not your calling, but it might look like going down to a place where you know that people are going to be not nice to you and still loving them and doing something for them anyway. And that's radical in its own way.
Yeah, you said something, and I don't know whether or not you guys realize that what you're saying. Maybe you do. Maybe that's good that you have. The modern American believer is always looking for their blessing. And I keep hearing this God is going to have a breakthrough for you, and God is going to do this for you, and you're going to get this from God. And a revelation came to me while I have been doing this particular program for the last year. Okay. And I think a lot of the church has forgotten that we're supposed to be dead. We ourselves, what we want is supposed to be dead. Before we even enter the call of Christ, he told us to die to this. And people think, oh, sin. No. You, all that you want, all that you think you need, all you think you can get, that's dead. You are functioning now in what I want you to do. And everything you're doing is not for you, it's for me. And because I want this done, you should be willing enough to do whatever I ask you to do. And you two are doing exactly that. Like you said, you prayed for something radical. And what you're doing seems so radical to people today when it should be the norm.
Yeah.
It should be something that should be a natural thing, because you're dead. And I've said this before, people don't understand. If you're dead, then you should not have any wishes of your own anyway. You're pretty much living a different life, which is his life. Then he should be operating through you. As you were talking, he brought back a song to my mind, and I don't think you guys know this one, but I don't know if you're familiar with the group Acapella.
I don't know.
Yeah, they're an older group. They're still around, but I recorded with them back in the day. This was like way back in the day. We're talking like 2000, 1999, way back in the day, 20 plus years ago. And they did a song called "And They Praised God." And it's almost exactly verbatim the stuff that you've been talking about. So I'm just going to read a couple of the lyrics here for you. So it says, I sang to the people in Russia as they were searching for the truth. Their eyes were so cold and empty, and from the eldest to the youth, what a privilege I had to carry the joy of the God we love. And I sang of the Christ and his compassionate life, of a home he's prepared above, and they praise God. Then he said, I sang to the people in Africa, some who didn't have food to eat. In the depths of full-blown poverty, most were living in the street. What a thrill to deliver the gospel to the people who were so distressed, holding back the tears and the cultural fears. Overwhelmingly, I was impressed, and they praised God. And then he said, I sang to the people in my hometown, trying to guess their minds. Most had already heard the precious word of a God who's good and kind. And as I sang, I could tell that they knew it, and I didn't sing for the joy of the song, but because of the cross and the Savior's loss to deliver mankind gone wrong. What I found crazy about those lyrics is this.
Mm.
The first two locations that, and this is what you're experiencing firsthand, the first two locations, there were people that had to depend on God. His hometown in America, they already knew. And he couldn't sing for them to know anymore. He had to sing for what he already knew. And that's a sad testament. When I say sad, that's like literally the most sad thing I could think of, in the fact that you could only sing to the people who have heard it before and only internalize the gospel because they already know. Your work in the mission field is not only commendable, but I can't commend you for you, and you know this. This is not something that you are looking for a commendation for, because I've spoken to you in off this screen. We've met in person. I know you personally, and I know that your heart is for the kingdom, not for commendation. This next phase of your mission trip, which is coming up this summer, you're going to be gone for quite some time. You're going to be moving around a couple of months in some spaces and weeks in some others. But if you had a request for prayer outside of protection, what would it be?
We will do some events and missions within the U.S. for a little bit, but we're looking towards our winter overseas chunk, and it's looking like a good chunk of that is going to be in Southeast Asia, both working through evangelism, relief, and then also in the counter trafficking world. Hopefully, getting a little bit deeper into that there, and then we'll go back to Ethiopia probably for Christmas and New Year's. That's our plan, at least. So up to God, but we've kind of got this winter mission chunk that we've got some ideas about, but just that God would take it wherever he wants, and that we wouldn't stand in his way, because maybe he wants us to go somewhere totally different.
I think my prayer request is open hearts in all directions, for anybody who's listening to this right now, for Lane and I both, and for the people that we are ministering to, just that hearts, like people would hear in a new way. Maybe if they've heard the gospel before, that they would hear it with new ears, and that people would actually pray to God for themselves, and that they would pray honest prayers, and that their lives would be changed by it.
That's a dangerous thing you just said. I don't know if you realize that. That's a
Dangerous.
very dangerous thing.
Yeah.
Pray honest prayers. That's
Yeah.
When I say dangerous, I mean dangerous to the lie that's been perpetrated throughout the church now.
Yeah.
We have become superficial, and I think we can be honest about this. We have become superficial. We have become materialistic, and we have become soft. Countless messages about what God has promised you in happiness and joy, when he's actually never done that anywhere in the book. He has never promised that. He promised peace, but what he really promises, trials and tribulation and suffering and anger from people and hate. And he has promised you almost sure death for what you believe. And that doesn't necessarily have to happen in the mission field. It happens in your day-to-day life, which technically is the mission field.
Yeah.
What I think this will do for people is showing them, because normally when I think of missionaries, and I think you can admit to this, when you hear of a missionary, you do not think your age. You are not in the normal age range for a missionary. And I don't mean that as a knock. I'm saying that is an anomaly anymore. Meanwhile, back in the day, these were young men. The disciples were not old. The apostles were not old. They were young when they were doing this stuff. They were just barely out of their 20s, some of them in their 20s doing this stuff.
Mhm.
Um, you guys are what, barely in your 30s if you're there yet?
I'm 32. She's
Yeah.
28.
Yeah, you're barely there. You're just getting started in life. But you have gotten a hold of a truth in Christ that it is not my life, it's his. What this is going to do, and like I said, a lot of people look at missionaries and think old or older. You're breaking that mold by showing that at this age is the perfect time to start because you get to use all your vitality. You get to use your healing ability from being injured. You get to use in your lack of need of necessarily sleep because you can do it now when you're young is the perfect time to do it. Yeah, now, hey, I need my nap.
Duval doesn't sleep.
I am not gonna dog nobody that takes naps anymore.
I get
A
it.
nap, man, ain't nothing like a good nap at this age.
You
I'm
can
telling you
nap
now.
anywhere.
Yeah, well, I can't nap anywhere, but I have to have a nap, which means I have to get home so I can take it. But you're proving to people that the mission field is not um, set in stone for a certain dynamic and a certain group. Um, this whole interview, and I'm going to leave I'll tell people how to get a hold of you in a minute here, and I'll bring up the website. But
Thank you.
this concept of mission work has gone so far off the rails when it comes to the church that hearing you guys speak about where you are is a breath of fresh air because we unfortunately have become anti-Christian in our Christianity. if and I think that's the only way I can really explain it is we have become anti-Christian in our Christianity. We don't want to do the things of God. We don't want to do the sacrifices needed. We don't want to get out of our comfort zone. We don't want to leave anything behind. We need this. We need that. We have to have this. If you're going to send me back, you need to have money to do this. The mere fact that you guys are being as radical as you are is a testament to the trust you have of God because you don't, and your trust isn't that he's going to keep you safe. Your trust is that he's going to get his work done. And
Amen.
that came through loud and clear long before this interview. That you're not really caring that he's coming through to keep you safe in the places. Otherwise, you wouldn't be going to these locations.
Yeah.
Your wish is that he be glorified, he be known, and that whatever that you can do to make that happen, you're going to make it happen. If nothing else, whether your life is spared or not, that it's going to place that he is going to become known. Um, this is their website, guys. Um, I'll leave it in the section here for you guys to have it in the chat. And on this page, you can see where you can support them in the donate. You can get their music and see what they're doing. They have their story. Um, they have the places they've been and the kinds of people they've touched, their process. And you can see right here, this is a big deal. This is one of the biggest deals right here. Okay. I want you guys to make sure you get this. What you're supporting is not just um, two young people trying to make a name. This is not what they're doing. This has a goal to do what God has called every believer to do, and that is to be the hand and the feet of God in the places that is needed most. And that could be your backyard. And for them, it's where they've been going. So please make sure you go check out this website. I'll leave it one more time in the chat for you guys to go check it out. And I think on that page, there's a link to the Exodus Road. Is there not?
Yeah, there should be.
Okay. The
Yeah.
other location is called the exodusroad.com. The exodusroad.com. And I'll put that in the comment section as well. Make sure you go check out those two websites. Any last words you want to leave with people before we shut this down?
Man, thank you for having us. Yeah, for anybody listening, thank you for listening. And just start with a little bit. Just allow God to give you those little crazy ideas, and don't let anybody get in your way. If that's what God's saying, if that's what the Bible is saying, the amount of people that have that have tried to talk us out of things is, you wouldn't believe it. And Christians as well, and
Mostly Christians.
Mostly Christian. And no offense to them, it's just it's a culture thing. It's it's a trust thing. But people will try to talk you out of doing what God wants you to do, because it looks completely crazy to the life that we live here. And really, it's the best, and we love it, and it's worth all the things you give up for it.
I do want to also add, like everything that Marlon is saying is true about, like, God doesn't promise us happiness or wealth, or he promises us the opposite of those things. And if you have those things, it doesn't, those are tools that you can use to serve God.
Thank you for saying
and it
that.
doesn't necessarily mean that it's definitely going to be taken away. But what I will say is that no matter what you give up, God returns in tenfold. And that doesn't even mean that you're going to get 10 times the wealth. It means you're going to get 10 times the happiness. When you give up your wealth, you'll have 10 times the happiness as when you had it. I just want to say I came from a Christian family when I was a kid, walked away from the church. I was atheist for years. And not only that, but I hated Christians, thought that I hated God. And I became a drug addict and an alcoholic. I mean, I went fully down the road of like what I thought that I wanted. And I can't think of any time in my life that I was unhappier. And at the very rock bottom, when I was about to die of my drug addiction, I met a woman in a gas station who told me about Jesus in a way I hadn't heard before, and she was just somebody who lived in Texas. She wasn't this crazy like missionary that went off to Africa or Asia. She was just a woman who went to church in Texas and was on a road trip, and she stopped at a gas station, saw me in the bathroom, and stayed there praying for me for 3 hours. So that's an example of somebody who was really radical in their own home and in their own situation. And she changed my life. Like her obedience to God to like pray for a girl that looked really mean, like strung out in the bathroom, like that changed everything for me, because that was the moment that I met God, and that I actually invited him into my life and invited him to change me. So I know it's scary to hear these things like, oh, God is promising that I'm going to have a really hard life. Like, yeah, that's true, but you're going to be happier than you ever were in God. Your joy will be in God, and your joy will be something that nobody can take from you. It doesn't have to be like, oh, I'm going to, one day I won't be as healthy. One day I won't be, maybe I'll lose my money. Like the joy that God gives you cannot be taken by anybody or anything.
Because he's the joy. That's, I think, and because he doesn't change, there's no fluctuating with that joy. I think a lot of the church has forgotten this.
Yeah.
We are not finding our joy in circumstance. We're not finding our joy in what he can give and what we get. The joy is in an unchangeable God.
Yes.
And because he's unchangeable and he cannot be changed, nothing about my joy changes. Circumstance doesn't change it. Lack of things doesn't change it. The having of things doesn't change it. None of it changes because he is my joy. Yeah. And I really appreciate you guys for agreeing to do this today.
Yeah,
man, thank you. Thanks for having us. And
it may feel like I'm not appreciating you at 2:00 when you have to go up against Ethan, but
it's all good.
For your benefit.
He's prepping us for the mission field. With
there you go.
Training.
I'll be training with them later in case you guys are wondering what I mean. I'm training them today for some self-defense stuff. And so I'm one of the biggest guys in my group is 280 pounds. Big, 6'3" or 4", something like that. Big guy. A gentle teddy bear kind of guy. But I'm going to be having them go up against him. So it'll be interesting to see. I might record it and put it on YouTube.
Missionary training 101.
Missionary 101. They became the trampoline. No, so
oh my gosh.
They became the trampoline. So thank you again. I will make sure to put your link in the description on the video after it's all said and done. And I will put a hyperlink to their YouTube channel as well, because it's out there. And I need you guys to go check it out, give them some love, give them support. And if it's something that you're like, I always tell you guys, talk to the author first before you make a decision about giving, because you don't want to just give because I'm a good guy. Always talk to him, Run everything by him, and he'll direct you not only in if, but in how much. Because a lot of us get a tendency to just do because, oh, I'm going to feel better about it after. That's not the reason you do it. Everything has to depend on his. It's his kingdom, and if you're
Mhm.
sowing into his kingdom, it has to be by his rules. So always take it back to the author. Never, 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 never depend on your own understanding for anything, even anything I tell you. I always tell you take it back to the author. So please do that. So I'll catch you guys later at 2 o'clock today.
All
For the
right.
rest of you, we will be on with Too Strong tonight. Make sure you catch that, and we'll be back on with the mix as well. Um, y'all have a very grand rest of the day, and remember, wisdom calls to you from the streets. Please, please, please find wisdom. Peace.
Hold tight the dreams, for if dreams die.